Working the graveyard shift at a gas station isn't as bad as people think. Most nights, it's just me, the hum of the coolers, and the occasional customer stumbling in for a pack of smokes or a late-night coffee. It's quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you start hearing things, feeling things, wondering if you're really alone. I was only 22, a college kid in a new town, just trying to make rent. The gas station was small, isolated, just a single row of pumps, a convenience store, and a bathroom in the back. Most shifts were boring, but that night I almost didn't make it out alive. It was a slow night, no customers for hours, just me sitting behind the counter, scrolling through my phone, trying to keep my eyes open. The store was eerily still. The fluorescent lights flickered every now and then, casting weird, jittery shadows against the walls. Outside, the road was empty, just darkness stretching in every direction. Then the bell over the door chimed. I looked up, and that's when I saw him. He didn't say a single word, no greeting, no glance around, just stared at me. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he turned and drifted into the aisles. I watched him on the security monitors. He stood there in one of the aisles, not moving, just staring at the products on the shelf, not picking anything up, not browsing, just standing. For 10 full minutes. Then, without warning, he turned sharply and walked into the bathroom. Another customer finally came in, just a guy on his way home from work, grabbing some cigarettes. I processed his payment, made small talk, watched him walk back to his car. And then I realized something. The weird guy never came out of the bathroom. I glanced at the security cameras, rewound the footage. I saw him enter the bathroom, but I never saw him come back out. My stomach dropped. I told myself maybe I just missed it. Maybe he slipped out when I was distracted, but something didn't feel right. I decided to check. Grabbing a box of snacks to restock, I made my way toward the back, passing the bathroom door as casually as I could. I was about to turn away when a loud crash from inside, a heavy thud. Before I could even react, the door exploded open. The man burst out full speed, his coat flaring behind him, and in his hand, a knife. He lunged at me with everything he had, tackling me to the floor. The shelves beside us collapsed, sending candy and bags of chips flying everywhere. "I want the money," he screamed, his voice raw and inhuman. I tried to push him off, but he was strong, too strong for someone so thin. The knife swung wildly, missing my face by inches, slicing into my sleeve instead. I felt warmth spread down my arm, blood, my blood. I fought, kicked, shoved, anything to get him off me. Somehow I managed to break free. My chest heaved, my pulse thundered in my ears. My feet slipped on spilled soda as I sprinted for the door. I ran outside, gasping for air, and that's when I saw them. Headlights, flashing red and blue. A police cruiser was driving past. I threw myself into the road, waving my arms like a lunatic. The car skidded to a stop, the officer already reaching for his radio and gun. And behind me, the man was still coming, knife raised. The cop reacted instantly. "Drop the knife! Hands in the air!" The man hesitated, just for a second, then he turned to run. He didn't make it 5 steps before the cop tackled him to the ground. I stood there, shaking, watching as they wrestled the knife from his grip, cuffed him, and shoved him into the back of the squad car. I was still bleeding, still in shock. The officer turned to me and asked if I was okay. I just stared at him, my hands trembling. I didn't know how to answer. They told me he was a drifter, no home, no ID, no records. And the worst part, the cops think he had been hiding in the gas station for days, watching me, waiting. People don't think of movie theaters as scary places. Loud, crowded, filled with laughter and overpriced popcorn. But everything changes when the last movie ends, when the seats are empty and the lights go dark. I had just started working graveyard security at an old theater, one of those classic vintage cinemas built decades ago, with faded red carpets, gold-trimmed walls, and halls that stretched just a little too long. I was warned about a few things. Which doors should never be left open, which rooms I should avoid lingering in, and why I should never, ever go into Screen 7 alone. I thought it was all just creepy workplace folklore, until I found out the hard way. My first shift was simple. Walk the halls, check the doors, make sure no one's hiding in the bathrooms. The place should have been completely empty. Should have been. I started my rounds at 2 a.m. The building was silent, except for the soft hum of the old projectors cooling down. The floors creaked under my boots as I moved through the hallways. Everything felt too still. Then I heard it. A soft, scuffling noise, like something moving across the carpet. I froze, listened. The noise had come from screen 7, the one I was warned about. I took a step forward. The door was open just an inch, enough for me to see that the screen was still lit, even though the projector had shut off hours ago. Something was wrong. I pushed the door open slowly, and that's when I saw it. A silhouette, a man sitting in the back row, completely still, watching the blank screen. My heart slammed against my chest. No one was supposed to be here. I cleared my throat, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Sir, theater's closed. You need to leave." The man didn't move, didn't even flinch. I took a slow step forward, my flashlight shaking slightly in my grip. "Sir, I need you to..." Then, without warning, he turned his head. Fast, too fast. And I saw his face, sunken, hollow cheeks, eyes that looked too wide like they hadn't seen sunlight in years. He had been living here. Every instinct in me screamed to back away. I reached for my radio, my other hand moving toward the phone in my pocket to call the police. Then he lunged at me. The seat squeaked as he sprang forward, arms outstretched, fingers curled like claws. I barely managed to dodge as he grabbed at me, his breath ragged and fast. I sprinted into the hallway, slamming the door shut behind me, my hands shaking as I called 911. And then, I heard running footsteps. I ran, past the concession stands, past the lobby. I could hear his footsteps pounding behind me, barefoot, slapping against the tile, getting closer. I turned a corner and grabbed the emergency exit bar, shoving it open. The alarm screamed through the empty halls. I ran outside, and the moment I turned back, he was gone. Vanished. Just like that. By the time the police arrived, I was still trying to catch my breath. They searched the building, checked every theater, every hallway, nothing. No sign of forced entry, no belongings left behind, like he had never been there at all. But I knew better. He was there, he had been there, maybe for weeks, maybe longer. I never saw him again. Not in the security cameras, not in the building logs. But every night after that, when I walked past screen 7, I felt it. That heavy, suffocating feeling, like someone was still sitting there in the dark, watching. Old hospitals have history. You feel it in the air, the weight of the past, the things those walls have seen, the pain they've absorbed. Some buildings were never meant to stand this long, and some things inside them never left. I worked at a mental hospital that used to be a tuberculosis sanatorium in the early 1900s, the kind of place with long, endless corridors, flickering lights, and doors that never seemed to close all the way. Strange things happened there, things we couldn't explain. It's easy to blame it on the patients, delusions, paranoia, psychosis, but some stories went beyond that. I worked with teenagers, but my sister wing handled the younger children. Over the years, different kids, ones who never knew each other, started saying the same thing. They'd come out of a specific room, shaking in the middle of the night, and ask staff, "What do you want?" Confused, the nurses would ask, "What do you mean?" And every time the child would say, "You called my name." But no one had called them. And it always happened in the same damn room. The main building had its own stories. It used to house the morgue in the basement. Rumor had it, there was even a body incinerator down there. We laughed it off, until the calls started. More than once, police and fire crews showed up late at night, saying they'd received an emergency call. A call from inside the building. But no one on staff had called them, and when they traced the number, it led to the basement. A basement with no active phone lines. I mostly worked day shifts, but one night I covered a double and had to stay late. Around 10 p.m., I had to return a TV cart to the main building. The halls were quiet. Too quiet. Most of the lights were dimmed, and the few night staff that were around kept to themselves. I rolled the cart into the old-fashioned elevator, one of those with a cage gate, the kind that groans every time it moves. I hit the button for the third floor and waited. Then the elevator went down. I felt it in my gut immediately. Something was wrong. The elevator dinged, the light flickered, it stopped at the basement. The doors creaked open, only halfway, just enough to see the darkness beyond. I stood there, frozen, heart pounding. I was about to slam the button to go up when I saw it. A figure, just beyond the doors, not standing but crouched like an animal, its face hidden in the shadows. It didn't move, didn't breathe, just watched. Then, it took a step forward. The elevator slammed shut, and I felt something brush against my ankle. When I got back to my building, my coworkers saw my face and asked what was wrong. I told them what happened, the elevator going down on its own, the figure in the basement. One of them nodded slowly. "Did you see his face?" he asked. I hesitated. "No." He exhaled, shaking his head. "Good. I never worked the night shift again." Some places don't forget their past, and some places never let go of the people inside them. I never wanted this job. But when you're broke, 24, and drowning in student loan debt, you don't have the luxury of being picky. The pay was decent, the hours were long, and I figured driving a forklift all night in a warehouse full of power tools would be the least dangerous job I could get. I was wrong. I didn't know it yet, but that place had its own unwritten rules. Things the day shift workers never had to deal with. Things I was about to learn the hard way. The store itself was huge. One of those big box home improvement stores with endless aisles of plywood, paint cans, and tools no one actually knew how to use. But behind it, there were two warehouses, one for inventory and another one, set further back, that was only used when we ran out of space. That second warehouse? No one liked going in there. It was colder, quieter, and for some reason, it never felt completely empty. I had only been working there for 2 weeks when my supervisor tossed me the keys and said, "Check the overflow warehouse, see if we can store extra inventory there." I rolled my eyes but grabbed the keys. If it got me out of unloading another shipment of tile flooring, I'd take it. I hopped onto the forklift, cranked the engine, and drove out into the night. The drive was short, but the second I got inside I felt it. The air was different in there. Stale, too still, too cold for a building that had been sitting in the sun all day. I drove deeper inside, my forklift's headlights cutting through the darkness. There were no windows, just tall metal shelves stacked with boxes of seasonal decorations and leftover inventory. I was halfway through the building when it happened. The forklift died, just dead stop. No warning beeps, no power down sequence, nothing. The headlights blinked out, leaving me in complete, suffocating darkness. I sat there gripping the controls, my pulse hammering. I tried the key, nothing. Tried again, still nothing. Then my eyes adjusted, and that's when I saw them. At the far end of the warehouse, past the empty shelving units, figures stood in the dark. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but as I sat there, barely breathing, they started moving. Not walking, not running, just drifting. At first, I thought they were just shadows, tricks of the light, but then I noticed something wrong. They weren't moving toward the exit, they were moving toward me. I turned the key harder, my hands slick with sweat, the engine didn't even click. I told myself it had to be workers from the day shift, a prank, a trick of the dark, but my gut was telling me run. And that's when I noticed something that sent a cold, paralyzing chill down my spine. The figures weren't casting shadows. They were halfway across the warehouse now. I could feel the weight of their gaze, even though they had no faces. I slammed the key forward one more time, my hands shaking. And suddenly, the engine roared to life. The headlights flared on, flooding the warehouse with blinding white light. And in that split second, I saw the truth. There was nothing there. The figures that had been moving toward me were gone. The empty aisles stretched, silent and undisturbed. My stomach turned. I knew what I had seen. I knew they were there, and they had been getting closer. I slammed the accelerator and sped out of the building before the lights had a chance to flicker out again. I didn't say anything when I got back to the main building. I was too shaken. But I had to know, had to be sure. So I checked the security footage. It showed me driving into the warehouse, stopping, sitting in the dark for 5 minutes, then turning on the headlights and driving away. Nothing else, no movement, no figures, no one there but me. But here's the part that still haunts me: the timestamp. It showed that while I was inside, the footage had glitched. A full 45 seconds of static, and when the video came back, the forklift was already moving again. I never worked alone in that warehouse again. And if you ever find yourself in an empty building at night, and you get the feeling that someone is watching you, don't wait for the lights to turn off. I've always had a bad habit of overworking myself. I was the kid who triple-checked homework, the one who spent way too long making sure every detail was perfect. But that kind of obsession doesn't work in military training. I was 25 when I joined the Air Force. I had spent years in college, bouncing between jobs, never quite sure what I wanted to do. Signing up was supposed to give me discipline, structure, a real future, and in a way it did. But in those first few weeks, I was just trying to survive. Every day was an endless cycle of drills, shouting, exhaustion, and rules. Rules about how to walk, eat, breathe, exist. But the one rule that stressed me out the most? The uniforms. They had to be perfect. Which is why at 3 a.m. while the rest of my squad slept, I was still awake, ironing. That night I learned the hard way that some things are more important than looking perfect, like knowing when to stop. I stood at my tiny metal locker, smoothing out the creases in my uniform. The iron hissed with each pass, the only sound in the silent barracks. Everyone else was asleep, lined up in their bunks, barely shifting, completely still. It felt like being surrounded by mannequins. The overhead lights were off, but I had my small desk lamp on, casting a dim yellow glow over my hands. It barely reached the rest of the room, leaving the far corners buried in shadow. I wasn't thinking about anything, just pressing the iron, trying to keep my eyes open when I heard it. A voice, right behind me. "You're still up?" I turned my head slightly and saw Jane, the girl in the bunk next to mine, sitting up in bed. She was leaning on one elbow, watching me with a sleepy expression. "You need to stop doing this," she murmured, rubbing her eyes. "You're gonna burn yourself out." I exhaled, focusing back on my ironing. "Yeah, I know. Just need to finish this one shirt." Jane chuckled. "You always say that." We talked for a few more minutes, random stuff. I don't even remember what. I just know that, at some point, I finally looked directly at her. And she was gone. I blinked. My stomach dropped. I knew she had been there. I had just spoken to her. Heart pounding, I stepped over to her bunk and whispered, "Jane?" She didn't answer. She was asleep, completely still, like she'd been that way for hours. A chill ran through me. My brain scrambled for an explanation. I was just tired, exhausted. Maybe I had imagined it. And then I heard it. A whisper from the dark corner of the room. I tried to shake it off, told myself it was just exhaustion, but I suddenly felt sick, like the air was pressing down on me. I decided to go to the bathroom, splash some water on my face, clear my head. The second I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The lights flickered, making the mirrors warp in strange, distorted flashes, and the whispers were louder now. It wasn't just one voice anymore. It was many, like a group of people talking behind a closed door. Except there was no door, just cold, empty air. Then the stall doors creaked, one by one, opening. I turned to leave, but the door wouldn't open. My hands shook as I yanked the handle. My own reflection in the mirror was flickering, distorting, as if something was standing behind me. I didn't look. I pounded on the door, heart racing. "Let me out!" And then it all stopped. The whispers, the flickering lights, the nausea. The door swung open by itself. And just as I stepped out, I heard it, one last whisper right next to my ear. "You should have gone to bed earlier." The next morning I told myself it was just exhaustion, just a hallucination. But then I heard it from another recruit. "Did you ever hear about the girl who died in the barracks years ago?" I felt cold. "What happened?" "Collapsed from exhaustion. Found her still clutching her iron. I never stayed up past 9 p.m. again."